Hey y'all, this is Thoughts Between Shots, a storytelling podcast where one great question leads to one unforgettable story. I'm your host, Nammy Sirur, and every episode I ask my guests to tell us a story and then we break it down to talk about why it worked so well. If you want to become a better storyteller, ask more thoughtful questions, or really just become a more effective communicator, you're in the right place. My guest today is Rosa Yupari. She is so much fun and such a great storyteller, and you'll see exactly why. Rosa, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a language or cultural misunderstanding that ended up actually opening more doors than it closed?
It was a couple of years after college. I was a manufacturing engineer at 3M. And I was in my constant battle of proving my ideas, making sure that I show what I knew. And I was hired at the same time as like these three other really young white males that were super polished and confident and smart and funny. They got along so well with the engineering manager. And, they were getting promoted. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get my turn. And so finally, one day, I get assigned the biggest project at the division. And it was making this electrical connector. So I was a manufacturing engineer for this electrical connector. And I had created this new process with this group. It was so important that we actually, apply for a patent. So it came to my turn to present this project. And I was in front in this room with the leadership team. I mean, we had the vice president, we had the directors, we had my boss's boss. And here came my turn, and I was ready. I had my slides going, my little connector pointer, that little thing that you point to stuff. And I started and I introduced myself. I was confident. And then I was starting describing the process. And it came to the part where I actually grabbed this little connector. And it was just like this little connector like this. And I said, this connector is so good and is so well made. I introduced these electrical wires and I started twisting them. And you see how wonderful this is compared to the competitor where the spring pops up. You can still twist it and twist it, and the connector, instead of breaking, it starts to belch. You see, it starts belching and belching. And suddenly I see people like turning around, and it felt like this, like there was this rumble, like this lumble of just chuckles a little bit. And suddenly it was like full laughter, but I'm talking belly laughs, crying, laughing, and everybody was laughing. And I was just like, oh, what did I do? What did I say? I mean, my head was this in this disassociation, like, how you're like feeling like everything is slow down and you're looking and you're thinking, what happened here? My turn, my moment of shine. And I asked the guy in front of me, the guy that was sitting right in front, and I said, what did I say? And he says, you say your connector starts to burp, that your connector was burping. And I said, burping? And I thought, oh my gosh. And at that moment, there was only two ways that I could react. I mean, and it felt like forever, but it was a matter of seconds where I said, this is it. I either just shrink and apologize profusely, like a good woman can do, and get all red and just slowly go sit on my seat, or do I just own the room? And in that moment that I said, I'm going to pick the latter. And at that moment that I said, ha, you guys didn't know that my connector had a new feature. This connector actually can burp. And I started laughing with them, and they started laughing even more. And I said, well, and with that, if you guys have any questions, and I think they just didn't have any more questions, because between the laughing and the presentation, they said, no, it was a good job. And I laughed, closed, joined the room, walked back to my chair, and I hear these claps of people clapping. Good job, Rosa. Pat on the back. Great. Everybody was happy. They had this joy around the room. And that was so pivotal in my career that when I realized it is not necessarily what you say. Yes. And it's not the perfect grammar. What really makes a difference is how you make them feel. And I make them feel joy in a very boring day. And they never forgot that. And I actually moved from this kind of shy manufacturing engineer that was trying to, kind of a little angry Latina trying to make her way, to just a relaxed person and just enjoy that I am who I am, and little mistakes are not going to make a difference. And that after that, they moved me into a job where I became the speaker. I was representing 3M throughout Latin America, throughout many places, giving speeches about this connector, which, by the way, became one of the hottest selling electrical connector in the United States. So if you have hired an electrician and you look at their bag, guess what? You're going to find a burping connector.
Oh my God, I love that story so much. That was so good. And okay, so also to clarify, the word you were trying to use was bulging, right? And instead of that,
Yes,
you
I
said
always
belching.
forget about saying that. It was bulging.
I mean, that's an easy mistake to make as an immigrant.
Yeah,
I can see that.
bulging,
Yeah,
belching. I mean, come
yeah,
on. Oh, I got
same
many of
here.
those on Nammy. I was telling
Yeah.
then I went on. I tell my daughter. I said, "Do you know that in Spanish, when you are confused, you get
Hmm.
really foggy, right?"
Yeah.
And obviously, I wanted to use it as a verb.
Hmm.
And so I was in the middle of this big technical meeting and they were asking me a question and I couldn't remember. And I said, just give me a second. I'm all fogged up. Okay. Just give me a second. And they were like, what? I'm really fogged up. Okay. So just give me a second and I would have them clear. And I'm like, I don't even think you know what you're saying. I go, I was just saying that I'm quite foggy. I didn't register.
Yeah.
That's another one where I have difficulty saying the word boss. And this was awful. I went to this manager and I said, and the director had just visited us. And I said, I really, really like your boss. And he goes, what? I said, I love your boss. And he goes, he stands up and he goes, what are you trying to say? I said, your manager. He's just so nice. Oh, my boss? And he goes, yeah, your boss. I love him. I got
Ah,
I got a whole book of those. But those were all one on one. This one though, this was a room full of people, right?
yeah.
And telling them that my brilliant connector burps. It
Yeah.
was just like,
Okay, so I have so many things to ask you about that particular story and everything related to it. But first, I think my audience should know who you are and what you do and why you're so amazing at storytelling. So, Rosa, who are you and what do you do?
well, I started as an engineer. I'm a process engineer. But then I moved into the tech support presenting and I moved into sales because I thought those people are the ones that make all the money. I go in
Mm.
there and present, but they're the ones that make all the money. And I was terribly mistaken because you require a lot of social skills and a lot of communication to be a good salesperson. And I didn't think a technical person like me could be one. But yeah, I excelled. And not only I moved up the ranks from engineer to tech support to manager to director to national manager. And then finally, I left 3M and I was hired to be the chief revenue officer of this telecommunications company. It was a tech
Wow.
company, and it was a public company, so I had to deal a lot with, directors, and I mean, board of directors and things like that. So definitely, my communication continues to improve, but I'm never going to wait until it gets perfect before I go for what I want. And storytelling, it is the core, the basis for selling your
Yes.
ideas, for selling my product, for
Hmm.
engaging with the customer. Storytelling brings this, what we call it, neural coupling, right? When your brain starts thinking like my brain, and you know that they've done studies to where they're showing two different movies in two different households,
Hmm.
and they realize their heart starts beating in, in like the same way, like their heart waves start to match.
Huh.
And it's just because when you're in a movie, when somebody laughs, it's contagious. When somebody
Yeah.
cries, it's contagious. So storytelling makes you relatable and
Yeah.
makes people remember you, and they remember what you're saying. Even the
Yeah.
most complicated technical products that I had to sell, I'm able to convey their value through storytelling. And that's how I became so good at it.
100%. I could not agree more because it's funny, right? So, a little background to the audience of why I instantly gravitated towards Rosa. I met Rosa just, I think, 2 weeks ago at an AI event. I saw her speak. She was on a panel. And this could have been a very boring event because it's a bunch of tech people talking about AI.
Yes.
But it was actually a really fun panel because everyone was so animated, and Rosa especially I instantly connected with because she talked about, I mean, you talked about your immigrant experience. You talked about the fact that when I moved from, she talked about when she moved from Mexico, she had to, I think you said
Peru.
you had to learn
I moved from
three.
Peru.
Oh, Peru. Sorry, sorry. So you had to learn three languages, I think you said. You said I had to learn English, business English, and engineering. It just instantly struck a chord because that is basically everyone I know. And that is my whole circle, right? When we moved from India, so many South Asians I know, the biggest profession they go into is engineering. And to hear you be an engineer and still be such a good storyteller and so sort of animated, because so many of my friends who are engineers feel this need to become this highly technical, highly serious, like buttoned up person. And so they don't quite value communication or storytelling and things like that because those seem frou frou, like those are soft skills, like those are cute. But it's only when you get to a certain level where you realize that, oh, now my career hinges on me being really good with people, and the best way to like you said connect with people, to be memorable, is to become a good storyteller and a good communicator. And when you've gone through most of your career not valuing that, to then suddenly make that switch is really difficult.
It's
So for
really good.
you, Rosa, do you feel like you were always oriented in a way to be a good storyteller, or were those skills you had to learn?
You know what? I think we all are. And I think we make a decision not to be honest, especially from our cultures,
Hmm.
because we grew up listening to stories. I mean, if you
Yeah.
think about it,
Yeah.
I grew up listening to my dad. My dad was a great storyteller.
Hmm.
The stories of, from poor to riches, and how he did it in every moment. And he had always this cliffhanger, and the way that he held the attention to many of the workers that they had. And so I think we all have that. And I'm sure you did too, right? Maybe you have your grandmother tell the story of when
Hmm.
she was walking 10 miles to go grab water. I don't know, something like
Yeah.
that, right? And so we all have it. And I think one of the mistakes that we make is that thinking that if you try to emotionally connect, that you're weaker, that
Hmm.
you're more vulnerable, and that you're going to get less respect. When it's the contrary.
Yeah.
You know what I do for a living now is I teach a lot of these CEO techs that are brilliant, that have created a brilliant product, how to sell. And I say, you have to tell the story and you have to connect with them emotionally. And their response is, I am not emotional. And I go, you don't have to be emotional.
Yeah.
I said, that is very different. And that is interesting because I have, actually, after this, I am having a workshop with the CEO. He is
Ah,
from Pakistan, and he has
okay.
this great product. It's an AI
Yeah.
product, right?
Hmm.
And he and his partner are moving, and he's saying, "Is my product is great, but I can't seem to close it." And I said,
Hmm.
well, you need to connect with the person. He goes, but that's not how we operate. We are in QA, software development. And so I started asking, I said, so how did you feel when software development was blaming you, QA, of, making mistakes? Oh, it was so frustrating. And, I was gaslighted because there's nothing I can do. And there's a lot of, oh, that's emotional, I said.
Hmm.
And so tell that story. Tell the story of how you felt when you didn't have your product.
Hmm.
Instead, and people will relate. And so, yeah, it's amazing how having that in you to use it, because
Yeah.
I believe everybody has it, truly.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I think the way, especially immigrants, think about this is so different, right? Because it's, first of all, the language barrier or the cultural barrier that we have to contend with first before we even think about, okay, how do I become an effective storyteller? So, for you, talk to me about your journey from Peru to coming to the States and how your communication evolved through your immigrant experience.
So when I came from Peru, I was 16 years old and I
Oh,
started
wow.
college. I was going into engineering school to Texas A&M,
Hmm.
and it was a big culture shock. First, I was too young to
Hmm.
socially understand it,
Yeah.
and it was very hard at the beginning. I didn't understand what the teachers were saying. Thank goodness nobody could, because believe it or not, a lot of the math teachers,
Hmm.
calculus teachers, they were also immigrants.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, there is something worse for me is I don't understand English, but I even understand less when you're
Yeah.
an immigrant because you have
Yeah.
an accent now.
Yeah.
And so I had to really study hard, but I really rely on other people, right?
Hmm.
I started asking for help early on because
Hmm.
I couldn't handle it. And as we always do, I tended to just hang out with all the Latin group and speak Spanish because that's how
Yeah.
I felt comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to leave my comfort zone. But I realized later on that I needed to really assimilate like all the culture. And so when I started working for 3M, it was very hard for people to relate to me. And you know what I did, which was brilliant. I always recommend this.
Hmm.
I started watching old American movies, but I'm talking classic.
Yeah.
I started watching things like the spaghetti westerns. I started watching the funny ones like Caddyshack, The Godfather, and a lot of Americana is created by the movies. So,
Yeah.
it's not like the movies use our words, the movies institute the words. And so every time I told a story, I would bring a line from a movie and people will laugh and they will enjoy it. And it moved on to my career in sales, to whether my boss always says, why is it that customers always would like to go lunch with you? Because they never have time to go to lunch with us.
Huh.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask them. And I remember that asking one of my customers, and he goes, it's because when I go with you, it's just like watching TV. It's just like you're always telling a story, you're always making me laugh, you always get your point across of what you need,
Yeah.
but you enjoy my company and I enjoy your company. And at
Oh,
the end of the
yeah.
day, that's what made me close more deals.
I love that. That's so validating because you sort of understand, okay, what am I bringing to the table above and beyond all things being equal? If everyone has, similar technical skills, right? You need that X factor, something that causes someone to want to be around you. And it has everything to do with the way you make them feel. Um,
Everything to do with the
yeah.
way you make them feel. Yeah. Everybody wants, she goes, I look forward when I gotta go out with you because you're always making me laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so one thing that I find really fascinating about your story, and especially the story you told, is the fact that you had two decisions, right? You could either shrink and be really ashamed and embarrassed, which a lot of people do, and it's totally
I
normal.
do. And they still do it, right? I see a
Yeah.
lot, especially a lot of women, but a lot of technical guys
Yeah.
do it. They
Yeah.
get, they shut down, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and you decided to just go with it and be part of the joke rather than having them laugh at you. You laughed with them. What do you think that instinct was in you that said, okay, don't shrink, just go with it?
It really was very instinctual, by the way,
Hmm.
right? It is a fight or flight situation, and I decided to do neither.
Mm.
I froze, right, like that. But in that moment, I realized this nobody's gonna take my moment, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you need to do, of course, is you have to be very prepared. I
Mhm.
always say no story, no, I mean, spin is going to help you from
Yeah.
not being absolutely prepared. You have to
Yeah.
always do that. But I think one of the things, especially I mentor a lot of women, I always say, you don't have to wait until you're good at something.
Hmm.
You have to tell yourself, I am what I am right now, and I'm always learning. So
Yeah.
I'm always getting better. And so in the moment that you walk into a room, I always say you got to breathe and honestly have fun, to
Hmm.
enjoy yourself, to own the room, and that you're always looking to be better in
Yeah.
general, right? Start with what you can do now, because one of the most damaging things that I hear people say, especially technical people, is that I'm not a salesperson. And a
Hmm.
lot of women say, I am not technical. Stop saying you're not,
Yeah.
saying, I'm always getting better at sales. I'm always getting better at understanding technical questions. And
Hmm.
so it is about what you believe where you are at right now. So
Yeah.
the mindset, going there knowing, I know this. I know this more than anybody else here. I don't have to prove that point. That point is proven. I'm here just to communicate, to enjoy myself, to do a good job. And are you going to feel nervous? Absolutely. I feel nervous every time. Every time I go to a podcast, my suggestion, don't try to be funny
Hmm.
on purpose. Don't try the jokes that you're not. And sometimes a little self deprecation helps,
Hmm.
but don't try to be something that you're not, right?
Yeah.
Every time I'm funny is because something just comes out, or I get a reaction of somebody that relates with what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, for one, preparation, that is key because, yeah, no amount of spin or storytelling will save you if you're not prepared.
I know.
Uh, and if you don't know what you're talking about. And secondly, I think you're so right that it's about having that mindset of, even if I don't have all the answers, it's that growth mindset and not putting limiting beliefs on yourself and telling yourself stories like, I'm not technical or I'm not a salesperson. Just say, I'm learning to be this, or I will get there someday. And then I think there's a third element. So I mentor a lot of the immigrant members I'm part of Toastmasters here in Austin, and we have a lot of immigrant members who've come recently and not so comfortable with language proficiency and the cultural things. One of them said something like, I think recently we were out somewhere and he said, well, what happened when this joke fell flat or when you failed? Did people stop talking to you? And I said, no, of course not. And that's the thing you have to remember is, no matter what, the stakes are not that high. I mean, so, okay, maybe you stumble on something, but the cost of failure is not that terrible. So
You don't
the more
remember
you
that.
tell
Yeah.
yourself that, the more, because when you think, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world, then yeah, you're going to be ashamed and you're going to retreat. But if you don't, then you say, okay, I'm going to brush it off and move on. What's the big deal? So, yeah.
It reminds me of when somebody goes dancing, right? And
Hmm.
they're like, oh, I don't want to go dance because it's going to be embarrassing and everybody's going to be watching me. It's like, how self-important you think you are? The
I
people
know.
are going to be
Yeah.
watching
Nobody
you.
cares.
Like, who are you? Are you like, a movie star? Nobody's going to watch you. Nobody cares. Let me explain to you. Nobody cares, right? And people have asked me what happens when a joke falls flat, because
Hmm.
this is the most embarrassing thing. First of all, don't be telling jokes if you're not a joke teller, because it's just the timing. If you're not that type of funny, I cannot particularly tell jokes. The only I am one of those people that use humor as in part of a story, right? And
Yeah.
if you tell a joke and nobody laughs and everybody just stares at you, which is one of those, it feels like forever. Say something like, well, that worked better when I was trying it in front of the mirror. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just that will make people
Yeah.
laugh because it's
Yeah.
like, because that little, just a tiny little self deprecation, just tiny,
Mm.
helps you relate
Mm.
because everybody has had that experience.
Yeah.
Everybody has tried to practice something and have fumbled at one point. And
Mm.
what you want is not for people to just laugh for the laugh's sake. What you really are going for is connection, right? Some people
Mm.
connect through laughter. Some people, I can connect through a really sad story. Just tell the story as who you are. Maybe you're better at the novela, like the
Mm.
drama. Just tell it that way, right?
And I guess there's still a way to bring the drama, even if you're not dramatic, because what you did so well in how you recited your story was you were using body language and your vocal variety. Like you were using your voice as an instrument really effectively, which a lot of people don't think about because often people just think, oh, the words I'm saying are the only important things, when in fact, how you say what you say is like 1,000 times more important. So I assume when you're training, salespeople and when you're training CEOs and stuff who are highly technical, are those things that you have to work on with them? And what are some
Oh,
tips that you give them on that?
so here's tone is 80%. When people do cold calling, for example, I always say, don't even worry about what you're saying. Just you gotta feel relaxed because people don't like to talk to people that are intense, right? Especially if you're calling me out of the blue. There's three different tones. Like there's the flat, and it has its use, right?
Yeah.
When you're negotiating and I'm playing poker, flat is good, right?
Mm.
Then there's the down. You want people to empathize. And if you notice in my story, when I started to talk about how I was feeling, my whole voice went into like this FM voice. So your voice started going down like this, right? A couple of octaves. And then when I started laughing, I went back up again to bring excitement. If somebody's telling you a story or my pain is this and this is my need, and you respond with a very active voice, people are going to say, are you like making fun of me?
Yeah.
Instead of, oh, I understand. That must have
Yeah.
felt awful. That must be really difficult.
Mm.
Instead of saying, oh, I wonder, is this super difficult? Like you're like,
Yeah.
what? The tone is absolutely everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way,
100%.
by the hands, do you see this? Do you know that there's been a study
Mm.
that the TED Talks that go viral are the ones where people start with their hands.
Oh, yeah.
When people say this and they talk with both their hands,
Mm.
people tend to trust you more. Because
Yeah.
imagine if I turn my hands like this and I talk to you like this, right? Can you see the
That's weird.
difference?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? You're like, what are you hiding? Right. And it's just a normal reaction. They want to see that your hands are there. So there is a level of trust that comes. And it's statistically proven. So it's not like I came up with that.
And I mean, it's whether you're on video or on stage, it's basically you still want to be a relatable human, right? I used to have this video company before this, and I used to work with all these big wigs, and they were really interesting, really animated people when you talk to them face to face. And then the minute they were in front of a camera, it was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And so I'd always tell them that, look, when you're on camera, you're just replicating you being there in front of the person. So, would you normally talk with your hands when you're talking to a normal human? Yes. So, then just use that. Be as human and as authentic when you're on camera as you are face to face, one on one. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
And
I
you
think,
have to figure it out that I don't know if you noticed that during the panel,
mm,
um, everybody was sitting and then I stood up, right?
yeah.
First of all, I don't speak well when I'm sitting down. Like right now, I'm speaking because you're in video. But if I'm in
Yeah.
front of the customer, the audience, I try not to be behind something. I always try to move away so people can see me and my hands and relate with me.
Yeah.
And I try to stand up, right? Because there's more energy, there's more blood flowing for you when
Yeah.
you're standing up than when you're sitting down. The whole purpose is not just what you're saying,
Mm.
but to be memorable, right? To
Yeah.
to make sure that what you're saying is sticking. So
Yeah.
I think that's very important. The position of your body and everything. Every little thing counts, right?
Yeah. Okay, so one thing, because a lot of my audience is immigrants who are maybe a little reticent to communicate and to really put themselves out there. I loved what you said about you don't have to completely lose yourself, right? When you're new to the country and you're going to work and things like that, you do feel this need to, okay, think about what is my work personality and what is my home personality. And especially if you code switch and you need to change your accent and things like that. But what I always tell people is it's not about complete assimilation, which means you have to become a whole different person. It's just about adaptation. And that first starts with building an awareness of what's happening around you. What does your new environment look like? And then building the confidence to say, okay, I want to keep these aspects of my culture or my personality. And then these parts I want to adjust to whatever the local culture is, but it doesn't mean you have to morph into something else.
You
So
don't have to ever morph into
yeah.
something else, but people always say you got to read the room, right?
Yeah.
I struggle with that quite a bit because
Mhm.
I am by nature, I was born loud. And a lot of Latins are loud and speak fast. And I realized that it was scary to speak so loudly like this. And it wasn't that I was trying to conform. I just wanted to make feel people comfortable. And so if speaking a little softer was gonna get my point across and I was gonna get a promotion, you better believe it. I'm gonna
Yeah.
speak softer. I'm
Yeah.
like, just figure it out what you want, right? Out of the
Yeah.
whole thing. If you wanna go there and say, everybody needs to accept me the way I am in
Hmm.
that angry tone, guess
Yeah.
what? You're scaring people. People sometimes get these in these just rigid positions
Yeah.
to where this is who I am. And if that's what's gonna take for you to go where you wanna go, then great. But be smart about it. I learned Americana
Yeah.
because it was a way to be able to relate. And
Hmm.
I felt that I could belong better. And there
Yeah.
is no shame to be able to adapt. So
Yeah.
just figure out what you want, where you want to
Hmm.
go, and do what it will take to get there.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation. This was so helpful, and I think that's why I wanted you on, Rosa, because the minute I heard you, I was like, oh my God. I know that you have an entertaining way to deliver your message, but you have really important, really useful, valuable things to tell my audience, which a lot of them can relate because they've all been in the same situations, both in terms of being an immigrant and being in technical roles and grappling with all these communication things that we all grapple with. So this was so wonderful. I would love for everyone listening to follow you. Where can they find you, connect with you, all of that stuff?
Yes, please connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm always helping people how to sell.
Hmm.
And again, it is the same. It's a storytelling. It's about connecting. It's about getting trust. And so my specialty, especially with technical people that are CEOs that want to be able to sell their product, or even people that want to sell their ideas,
Hmm.
it's all about communicating.
Yeah.
So contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn at rosayupari.com. My last name is spells like Yupari, and it's pronounced like I party, you party. So I
Mhm.
always say that so people remember. But
I like it.
yes,
Okay, awesome. And I'll link all of that in the show notes below. So just look out for all those links and go check out Rosa. She's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Rosa. This was so wonderful.
Let me thank you so much. It was really such a pleasure.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Thoughts Between Shots. If you laughed, cried, got goosebumps, learned something sneaky useful, share it with your people. And get involved. If you want to pitch a future storyteller, a killer question, or a guest, hit me up in the DMs on LinkedIn. I am always on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep being curious and keep telling good stories.